Welcome back to the channel. Racer X here, and today's video is actually about the 2024 Dodge Banshee. And I know there are a lot of questions out there about the Banshee. You saw me go up there for Speed Week. If you follow my channel, I revealed it to you live with the world, and it was a pretty cool unveiling. And of course, as far as Dodge is concerned, that is the future of muscle. Despite what many of you may like, it is what it is. And so there are a lot of questions. Hey, look, Racer X, how is this thing going to be priced? I don't understand. It says there are 9 power levels. Well, recently Tim Kuniskis did a podcast with some guys and revealed a lot of information about the Banshee and how those power levels are going to work. So today I'm going to share all of that with you. I actually did a little bit of research and went back to my old days and did even a bar chart for you. So it should be kind of an interesting one. I just want to be able to illustrate exactly how this pricing is going to work. Just kind of share the knowledge with you. If you're brand new to my channel, please do me a big favor. Only 22% of you watching at home are actually subscribed to my channel, and I've got all sorts of great stuff to share with you guys this year. It should be a lot of fun. Off we go.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Now, really quick, before we get too far into the video, just another quick reminder about my petition out there on change.org regarding dealer markup. The insane dealer markup we're seeing right now, is it right? Well, I don't think so. That's why I did the petition. And we are on our way to 50,000 signatures on this thing. Please make sure, if you have not signed it already, that you go do so and share it with as many people as you can. We are starting to see some things change already. We'll just have to kind of keep pushing. So make sure you sign that petition, and on we go with the video. Now, before we talk about how the price of the Banshee is really going to work, I want to give just a little bit of a review on what the Banshee really is, right? We know it is, of course, an EV, it's all-wheel drive. Now, there are some things that a lot of people really are not talking about a lot. One is the fact that, you know, we've got this exhaust system. That's the thing everybody really wants to hate on. And Tim Kuniskis, in a recent interview, did touch on the exhaust. And even when I was there at Dodge, he mentioned that it is a performance exhaust that was on that car, that Fradsonic. It is just, nobody really knows what it is, but he did talk about it just a little bit. But he did say it's kind of a speaker, but it's being amplified, and it actually does move air. It's a world's first type design on a car. I know that there are engineers that are specifically employed to work on exactly that. And so Dodge is very serious. They put a lot of man hours into that exhaust. This is all stuff I found out when I was up there at Dodge.
And by the way, the things that we've done to try to bring the fun back in, they're not great ideas from a development cost standpoint or from an efficiency standpoint, but they're important for this buyer.
And the other thing is they're still working on that. They wanted to kind of get everyone's take on it. Of course, most people hate it because most people hate the idea of an electric muscle car to begin with. But one thing he was very clear on was, look, we did not want this to sound like a V8.
We said we need to, number one, come up with a sound that is new, fresh, and modern. We can't make a V8 sound. That would be wrong. That would be like calling an electric car, you know, a traditional ICE engine.
And he told me that when we were up there. He mentioned it again on several interviews, but he said, look, that's the last thing we wanted, was to try and mimic a V8 sound. We wanted this to be very, very different. And when I talked to them about how they designed the Banshee, they didn't benchmark anything, right? They didn't go look, hey, look, the Tesla does this, this, and this, so we need to copy it. They simply did a whiteboard. They wrote down everything that people hate about EVs, a few things that maybe some people like, and then they basically said, look, these are the things we need to tackle when we design our new muscle car. So they designed it from the ground up, not worried about what Ford's doing or Tesla or Chevy or whoever else, just they wanted it to be distinctly Dodge. So we don't know exactly what the production model will sound like. We just know that it's going to be some sort of an amplification device under the car. It does actually move air, which is a first for an EV.
We created an algorithm that takes all the inputs of an ICE engine today, moves air through an actual speaker system, a box with chambers, plenums, pipes, and an exhaust outlet that comes out the back of the car.
But they wanted to put it out there and get people's initial reaction to it, which in most cases was pretty negative. But some people, they'll never be able to win them over because it's an electric muscle car. So there is that piece of it. Now, there are some other differences between what we saw at Speed Week, that concept car, and the production model. As mentioned, they're going to do a 60-40 split, actually, on the rear seat as opposed to the captain's chairs, which I actually really liked.
The concept car had 4 buckets. The production car won't. The production car will have a 60-40 split. So when you fold that down, you're literally going to have this massive flat floor in the back of that car.
And one other thing that's really important to me, and really nobody's talking about this, is the fact that the transmission is going to simulate shifts. Everybody's mad about the exhaust simulating whatever. It doesn't really simulate anything. I mean, it just sounds very unique, but it's not true noise, they're saying. People are just mad about that. And that's okay, but nobody's talking about the fact that the transmission is going to simulate shifting. I think that's going to be kind of neat, to be different, but it is, once again, it is truly just a simulation, the feel of shifting, and that's what they've done with that.
But it's that feeling of the shifting that I think is going to be something that people aren't, once they get used to driving electric cars, this is going to be totally different for them.
And also, they've got a couple other things that are pretty unique in this car. You know, the drift mode, the burnout mode, all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, we've got all this crazy pricing that nobody really understands. He mentioned 9 different power levels in the Banshee.
We're going to have 9 different power levels on this car, 3 directly from us, and then another 2 on each of those. So a total of 9, and the extra 6 will be from direct connection.
And everybody's like, how in the world can you make 9 different power levels? Well, in this interview, he revealed it's actually a little more simple than you would think. They're going to have 3 base power levels on the new Charger Daytona Banshee. So you're going to have kind of an entry level, a mid level, and then sort of a top tier level offering. And then from there, you will have upgrades in each offering. So you'll have 2 additional upgrades for the base, 2 additional upgrades that you can get through direct connection for the mid-tier offering, and then of course the Bad Daddy, the top tier. You'll have 2 additional upgrades that you can buy through your power brokers, through direct connection, to up the horsepower level of those. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So the way the Banshee pricing and power levels are going to work is a little bit of a foreign concept to most of us. Most of the time, you see what the car is going to make, they advertise it, all that good stuff, and then you know what you're getting, and there's no additional upgrades later. If you want to upgrade your car, typically that means you're ordering an aftermarket part, maybe a supercharger or twin turbos, maybe you're just ordering headers, and that opens up a whole new world of aftermarket possibilities. Lots of companies out there do it, and that's how exhaust companies, and that's how header companies, and all these different companies out there, a lot of them, that's just sort of what they do. Now all of a sudden, in the electrification age, we have a whole different set of circumstances, right? Because now we see these offerings that come out, and they can be upgraded directly through the manufacturer. So the manufacturer is kind of pulling a lot of that revenue in that we're seeing a lot of aftermarket people do. And yeah, I can see how the tuning can be kind of difficult on EVs, although some people will still probably try and do that again later. But Tesla was really kind of the first one to say, hey, look, guess what? Your car is actually more capable than what we gave it to you as. We're going to offer, for an upgraded price, we're going to offer 75 more horsepower. All you have to do is bring it into the dealership. We changed the software in it a little bit. We give it a more aggressive calibration, and now all of a sudden, instead of having X horsepower, you have X plus 100, and you pay $4,000, and then Tesla pockets that money. And it's kind of an interesting concept to think about. Well, this is what's happening with the Banshee. Now, I also want to mention, I don't know the exact horsepower numbers of these 3 offerings. So this is literally just my best guess for both horsepower and price. But I had to put something out there, and maybe you guys agree or disagree with what I've put here in terms of price, but this is really just for illustrative purposes. So I've got it pulled up here on my computer. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen for you now. I want to start with sort of that base offering, just so you kind of get a gauge of what we're talking about here. If we have a 400 horsepower base offering, you order the Dodge Charger Banshee in its base form. We'll say makes 400 horsepower, and we'll say the base price of that vehicle is $48,000. Now, of course, you're going to be able to spec these out a little bit different, just like you can cars now. It's going to come, to your dealership, and this is going to be what comes into the dealership. There are really only 3 power levels that are going to come into the dealership, and this is the base offering. So we'll say it's 48,000 base for 400 horsepower. Now, through direct connection through your power broker, you've got a couple of different options there. So perhaps you could upgrade your car by 100 horsepower, and of course now it's going to be 55,000. So for $7,000, you can get an additional 100 horsepower. Or you could upgrade maybe for 59,000, you could get an extra 150 horsepower. Keep in mind, those two offerings above and beyond the base price car would be through direct connection and power broker dealerships only. But this just gives you kind of an idea. And the reason I put those prices on there, you can see basically that upper level offering there in red would be about $11,000 more than the base car. But keep in mind, if you're going to go put a supercharger on something, maybe you would get 150 horsepower out of that supercharger. And this is just kind of my thinking on this. And by the time you put a supercharger on the car, the guys that say, oh, you can put a supercharger on the car for $6,000. No, you can't. I'm sorry. Be realistic, guys. So you have all sorts of other things that go on the supercharger. You've got labor, all that kind of stuff. Anybody that's ever done a supercharged car, you guys know. I mean, it's basically 10 grand out the door. So, I mean, that's kind of where I came up with this number. So we'll say for a base offering, plus $11,000, maybe you can have a car that makes 550 horsepower. Next, let's talk about the mid-level tier. So I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. So basically, we'll say the mid-level tier, 600 horsepower, maybe 65 grand from a base price perspective. Now, keep in mind, this is electric horsepower. So oftentimes it just doesn't translate the same way it does with internal combustion. Electric cars are very fast. So 600 horsepower electric car is a very fast car out of the gate. We'll say through direct connection, you have 2 additional power levels that you can order, one for $71,000 and one for $75,000. We'll say the $71,000 offering gives you an extra 100, and the $75,000 offering gives you an extra 150 horsepower. Like I said, top 2 levels there, only through direct connection and your power broker. But once again, you can see how everything just kind of starts tiering up. But even for 65 grand at 600 horsepower, that's still quite a bit. But think about a 750 horsepower for 75 grand, maybe from a base price. And then of course, you can always option it up from there. So there you go for the mid-range. Now, when we talk about this upper tier level, there are a lot of people that think this is going to be slower than a Plaid. A lot of people think it's going to be faster than the Plaid, but that seems to be the current benchmark in terms of power for EVs out there. And I don't know the answer, but this is my best guess on it. So when you look at basically the base level top tier offering, somewhere probably around $90,000. Mind you, you could probably spec it out to much more than that, but that is my best guess. We'll say $90,000 for 850 horsepower for that base offering. And then of course, if you want to jump up for an additional $11,000, maybe you could get an extra 150 horsepower on direct connection site, and of course through your power brokers. And maybe they'll even have a really bad daddy offering. And of course the mid-level would be what, 1,000 in this particular instance. And then of course 1,100, so an additional 250 horsepower on the very top tier, and that might be an additional 14,000 over and above what that mid tier is. So you can see a huge price jump basically from 90 to 115, so maybe a $25,000 price jump from direct connection. But if it gets you 1,100 horsepower and it will outrun a Plaid, then maybe that's something worth thinking about. So you can see basically from this diagram how the pricing structure is going to work and how they arrived at 9 different power levels. So it's not quite so overwhelming to think about when you look at something like this, but it does bring up a lot of other questions in my mind. Well, it's kind of like today's current Dodge Charger, for example. If you go buy an SXT that costs 35 grand, should it look identical to a jailbreak that costs 100 grand? Well, a lot of people would say no, the car's 3 times the price. You should definitely be able to tell the difference between the two when it's rolling down the street. So if you've got a mid-level tier, you've got a low tier, you've got a high tier, are they going to look different? Are they going to somehow give it some different characteristics where you can say, oh, that's the bad daddy high tier Banshee, oh, that's the mid-level, and you can tell the difference from 50 feet away? Or is that the low-level Banshee, the entry-level Banshee? I mean, are they going to be distinctive when you look at them?
Each one of those will have a slightly different sound profile.
Because is it really worth it? The Model S Plaid is kind of a trip, right? Because it could just be your traditional Model S. And it literally looks basically identical other than just like a little bit of carbon fiber on the spoiler, and there's some little bitty tells on the car. But if you don't know what you're looking at, obviously 99.9% of people cannot tell the difference between a Plaid, which is basically the fastest car on the road today, and a entry-level Model S. They literally just about look identical. And it's nearly impossible to tell them apart. And that's one thing I kind of wish that Tesla would do different, is like, let's make the Plaid look amazing. As fast as it is, it should look it. And of course, 135 for a base Plaid, and some of those creep up to like 160,000. So where will the pricing come in on all this kind of stuff too? But I really do hope for both the mid and the upper level tiers that Dodge does enough to make them look different, so that somebody can justify spending, say, 120 on one of these versus 50. Now, one of the other important things that Tim Kuniskis mentioned in his interview is the whole reason that they do these tiers on the power is so that you don't outrun, the chassis, the suspension, the brakes, all of that good stuff. So the lower level tier will not have as robust brakes as, say, the mid-level or the upper level, same with the suspension, all of that kind of stuff. So they wanted to basically engineer these things in a way where they could comfortably make the power that's offered from direct connection, but really not comfortably make the power that's offered at the next tier up. So they were very careful in how they designed the car at these 3 different power levels. So there's that piece of it. So this new model has really kind of changed people's thinking, and there's really a couple different arguments for it. I mean, some people say, hey, look, why would I go out and buy a car that makes 600 horsepower when it's capable of making 750 or 800 horsepower? And why should I have to pay to unlock the performance of the car? That's really stupid. And then on the other side of the coin, people say, hey, look, you know what? It's the same thing with an internal combustion engine. I mean, you think about it, if you buy a Hellcat at 717 horsepower, that car will easily make over 1,000 horsepower. Those of you that have watched my channel have seen that, right? I mean, it's just some pulleys, tune and some fuel, and not a whole lot of crazy stuff, and the car does it. I mean, look at my current Mustang. I strapped a twin turbo to it, put some fuel to it, and it makes well over 1,000 and could possibly make way more than that. So we won't go too much into that. So but that's done by aftermarket companies without a warranty. So really the big shift here is now the manufacturers are capitalizing on the fact that you could upgrade these cars, and the aftermarket companies won't be able to do it quite so much, but there'll still be aftermarket companies that are able to unlock even more. So what do you guys really think about this 3-tiered kind of solution that Dodge is putting out there? It's almost like having, say, like a GT or an SXT offering, a Scat Pack type offering, and a Bad Daddy Hellcat type offering. And then of course your power levels go up on each one of those. So hopefully this little diagram or bar chart that I put together for you, I should say, helps you guys to kind of understand both the power levels and how the pricing are going to work on this. Let's wait and see what the pricing actually is when they release it. So it's intriguing to me. There's a lot of stuff happening right now in the car world. It is really changing a lot. Also, guys, don't forget to sign that petition about dealer markup. Hopefully, when Dodge releases this car, it will be less than a Model S Plaid, even in its highest form. But we're just going to have to wait and see what happens here, guys. So let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and I will catch you on the next one. So until then, Racer X.